Well, welcome everyone. I want to recap where we've been. The Book of Ruth starts with a famine, and it was not just a physical famine of food. It was a moral famine. It was a lack of righteousness that was happening in the land of Israel. For this reason, a lot of bad things were happening in the land of Israel. One of the things that occurred during this period of the Judges, and that is where we are studying now, the Book of Ruth takes place in this period, which is 100 or 200 years between the time when the Israelites went into the land of Israel and the time of the first king, who was King Saul. The culture of that day was, I would call it raiding. An enemy would come, they would have a bigger army than yours, and they would just come and take your stuff. They would kill you, or maybe not, but they just would come and take control. One of the things that happened during the period of the Judges is in Judges chapter 3, we learn that Moab did this to Israel. Israel was a very new nation. They had recently come into the land. And the king of Moab, in Judges 3, it reminds us that this king's name was Eglon. He was a very fat man. That's just the way the Bible describes him, and I think it shows what was happening in this culture. They came across the Jordan River to Israel, and they started taking over. They took over the city of Jericho, and then they said, "Our army is bigger than yours. You have a choice. We can destroy you, or you can begin paying us tribute." So Eglon, the fat king, was used to getting tribute. For 18 years, Moab was oppressing Israel during this period of the Judges. Every year, they would have to bring him tribute for protection, essentially extortion. You don't want us to hurt you, you just pay us. So this is, instead of building up the country of Israel, Moab was providing nothing for them, or protection, they would have said. We're protecting you, we want you to pay us. So instead of putting a new room on your home, you ended up having to pay tribute to Moab. We call it taxes today, yes. Tribute. But as much as we dislike paying taxes, imagine what happens when another country is coming and you're paying not only taxes to your own country to run your governments and fire departments and whatever you want to run, but now you're paying taxes to someone else who's doing absolutely nothing for you, actually the cause of the American Revolution. Taxation without representation. We've got to run our own governments, and now we have to pay someone else. It's not right. It's not fair. It was under this system that Israel existed for 18 years. Do you think that nurtured any animosity between Israel and Moab? Indeed, it would have. Naomi's family goes to live in the country of Moab, obviously after that period of time, because there was a famine in Israel. Now, Naomi's husband died, her two sons also died, which is interesting. Instead of coming back after her husband died, because they have land in Israel, it is the promised land, they decided to stay in Moab. Then the two boys died. Obviously, this is a supernatural event. Today, we are not superstitious. We would probably consider ourselves substitious, if you understand that word. We really don't think anything that God would act in any way of judgment. But clearly Naomi believed that, and so would the other people living in Israel, her neighbors and community members to whom she is going to return. You have been judged by God. All the men in your family have died. They have died, presumably because you went to Moab and your sons married Moabite women. And lo and behold, Naomi brought one of the Moabite women back with her. This curse, that's how they would have seen her, as an enemy of Israel and as a curse on them and anyone who messes with her. One of the problems that we have with reading the book of Ruth is that most of us read it as if we're reading the story of Cinderella. The authorized version of the Bible and Cinderella were both published in the 1600s. There is an overlap. There's a reason that we want to see this as a gentle, beautiful love story where Ruth goes to the ball, instead she goes to the field, loses one of her slippers, and everything is going to work out well in the end. This is not Cinderella. This is a very rough time. Things in the field are difficult for her. She comes back. Naomi doesn't want her to come back. She recognizes there's going to be a lot of prejudice against this woman. I'm just going to go and I'll be fine on my own. Ruth insists on coming back with her, which is really interesting. You have to look at, why would this woman want to come back? Clearly, the God of Israel has judged this woman who is claiming this calamity has been brought on me by the Lord. Why would Ruth, who suffered, her husband died, why would she want to go and be under the protection of this God who has just judged Naomi and taken all the men in her family away? I believe that Ruth heard the stories of the God of Israel, and she wondered herself, why did you come to Moab? What are you thinking, woman? You serve the God of Israel. He opened the Red Sea for you, and you came to Moab. Somehow, Ruth, even though this great tragedy has happened, even though Naomi is angry with the Lord, Ruth is saying, I'm going to Israel. This is a good God. Even though my husband died, I believe my future, I want it to be under the God of Israel. It's a very powerful motivation if you think about it. Her sister-in-law said, no, thank you, I'm going back to my people in my country. But Ruth said, I want to live under that kind of a good God. Well, she's coming to Israel. She's going to go out in the field. There's been a lot of violence in this period of the Judges. At the end of the book of Judges, in the very last chapter, there are some men who need wives. They find a city that is unsuspecting. They hide in the field. When the women come out, they grab them and take them home. This is what we're dealing with in the period of the Judges. They just grab women and they take them. Ruth is going to go out into a field, and we have to imagine what this field is like. There are laws in the scripture that say if a woman is assaulted in a field, you need to believe what she says, because if she cried out, no one would hear her, versus if she's assaulted in the city. So they're already preparing you for what could happen in the field. All around where they're harvesting grain, I want you to imagine half of the field is harvested. There is standing grain on the other sides of where they are harvesting the grain. They're harvesting barley. There is probably a wheat field next to them, 3 feet tall of wheat. It's not going to take much for someone to pick her up and to carry her into the wheat. This is the field she's working in. This is not Cinderella. This is a Bronze Age setting, and the people reading this would understand that. We read it now, 2,000 years after Jesus, and we are affected, and we see this as sort of a church youth group or someone out reaping. This is a very dangerous situation. I grew up in a farming community. My father was not a farmer, but on all sides of our home in Wisconsin, we had fields. I worked in the alfalfa fields. We harvested strawberries for one of the farmers down the road, and also tobacco. I worked in the tobacco fields, which is a lot of manual labor. You have to take an axe and you have to cut down these plants. You're bending all day long. It's a lot of hard work. This is the kind of work that was happening in this wheat field. Very laborious work. The kind of people who are harvesting, they are young men. They are teenage boys. What is the culture of teenage boys like who are out in a field harvesting? Well, I can tell you from my experience in the field harvesting in rural Wisconsin, they are insulting, they are mocking, they are crude, they are joking, they are jesting, playing practical jokes, they are putting people down, they are making fun of everyone. This is the culture of teenage boys in Wisconsin in this century. Let's go back 3,000 years, and it's a difficult culture. It's an aggressive culture. I believe that if in the field that I was harvesting, if someone from a rival high school, let's say a woman from a rival high school, would have shown up in the field, that everyone would have made a lot of fun of her. She would have been the butt of the practical jokes. We would not have liked someone from our enemies, our high school rival. This is just football teams. This is not someone who has really wounded us or hurt us or killed the people in our community. We would have not treated her well. It's into that teasing, insulting environment that Ruth is going. Let's go back and retrace and read this story. Boaz now comes on this scene. It says, look, Boaz is here. Boaz comes up to his reapers. He notices there's someone in the field. This is a liability for him. He's responsible for what happens in his field. His first question, whose young woman is this? Who does this woman belong to? That question is never answered specifically, but the answer to Boaz's question is, who does this woman belong to? The answer is nobody. She belongs to nobody. She's fair game. He can tell by the way that they're speaking about her. And the servant who was in charge of the reapers says, she is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. Twice he mentions the enemies, right? This is our enemies. This is an enemy woman who's working here. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came and has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. So Boaz is talking now with the reapers, and he recognizes by the way they're speaking that this is a problem. And he goes to Ruth. Then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter. It's the first time Ruth is not called Ruth the Moabite. Boaz sees her as a woman who needs protection. We read this as a love story. He has no designs on her. He hasn't even met her yet. He's talking to these men. He can tell by the way they're, smiling and smirking and nudging each other, this woman is going to be in trouble quickly. He needs to help her. Besides, she has done a great service for the community. Naomi has come back from Moab destitute. The community would be expected to help her out. She would be at the mercy of either she would have to go out and glean herself, which is a very difficult job, picking up single stalks of barley, or they would have to give her something to help her survive. Ruth is providing an incredible service for the community. This woman came from Moab, their enemies, to help someone in their community, Boaz's relative, so that she's not on welfare. She's not going to go door to door begging. This is a tremendous service. Boaz sees her as an asset to the community. Everyone else sees her as a curse, as something negative, as someone to insult or diminish, devalue. Now listen, my daughter, do not go and glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. And we're going to find out later that Naomi, her mother-in-law, is going to tell her the same thing. Stay close to his young women. You may be assaulted in another field. This is a very real danger. She's actually saying, if Boaz would not have intervened, you would have been assaulted probably in this field. Your risk of assault is very high. You are an unprotected enemy woman from Moab. Verse 9 of Ruth chapter 2. I'm reading in the ESV. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping, and go after them, the young women. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? Have I not commanded? This is a command. This is not, we've asked the young men to be nice to you. I have commanded the young men not to touch you. If you know anything about the Middle East, men don't really touch women unless they're interested in something sexual. There's an understanding there that they're not going to be just patting her on the shoulder. They're not going to be giving her hugs. This is an aggressive thing that he's trying to tell her. I have commanded the young men. When did he command them? Oh, he was just talking to them. He heard what they were saying. He heard the way they were talking. He saw the smiles, and he said, do not touch her. I have commanded the young men not to touch you. When you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. Now, Boaz has just spoken to the young men. He told Ruth what he just said to them. I told them, do not touch her. He left the young men. He walked over to her. Everyone is watching. Boaz walk over to Ruth. I wonder what he's going to say. What's he going to do to the Moabite? Everyone's standing up in the field watching. He tells her, I've commanded the young men not to touch you. She falls on her face. She is so thankful that someone has seen her. And I believe that this is a powerful moment because how many outfits do you think Ruth has? A whole closet full? She just walked from Moab. She carried everything on her back, probably in one of those little baskets. Maybe she has another outfit, but the sun is hot. She's sweaty. It's a field that's been cut. There are little things sticking up in it. Everyone's watching her, and she falls on her face. This woman is desperate. This This is not Cinderella. This is a woman in great danger, and a man has come to protect her. And God has sent him. Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Boaz understands what it has cost her to come, and he also understands that God of Israel sees this kind of person and rewards this kind of person. How does Boaz know that? It's the kind of person he is. And ultimately, God wants these two together. God is telling us a love story here. It's just not the love story that we're used to hearing. This is not Cinderella. This is God's kind of love story. See, in Cinderella, it's all about, he saw the princess and he was so amazed at how beautiful she was that he wanted her and took the slipper door to door to find who was he concerned about? His desires. He wanted the woman for himself. He wanted the beauty to possess for himself. God's love says, I'm giving to you. I'm going to do something for you. Boaz is doing something for Ruth. And Ruth is doing something for her mother-in-law. This is giving. This is not just giving out of your access. This is giving sacrificially. This is who God is. This is what he wants us to see. This is the character of Jesus that is coming through these people. And God is saying, I want to get those two people together. They are so rare. They are such treasures. I must get them together. And they are going to get together, but it's going to take a little while. But right now, in the field, Boaz has no designs on Ruth. He's just trying to protect her. Verse 13 of chapter 2 of Ruth. Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. And at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine. It's probably vinegar. But she was probably standing over by herself. Again, excluded. She's an enemy of Israel. She's not going to be a very popular woman. Boaz is trying to help her. He's trying to bring her in. He gives her some bread. He gives her some roasted grain. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain. And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. Now she's going to take that leftover back to her mother-in-law, a piece of bread and some roasted grain. She's going to put it in her pocket, and it's going to show up later. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. One of the reasons that I am telling this story with a little more drama and a little more edge on it than you probably have heard before is because even the translators have tried to soften this. Don't reproach her. We don't really even use that word very much. That's from the King James. Some versions say don't insult her. Don't embarrass her. This is a very interesting word, and this is where I'm getting some of this drama that I'm telling to you. That word in Hebrew, I don't bring out a lot of Hebrew words. I think they can get a little heavy sometimes, but in this case I will, because this word reproach just sounds like, don't bother her too much. Be nice to her. Let me read you what it says in the Strong's Lexicon. I use the Bible Hub. If you have that app, you can look up these words. There's a interlinear concordance where you can see the Hebrew and how it's translated. This word, the Hebrew verb kalam, primarily conveys the idea of bringing shame, dishonor, and disgrace upon someone. You're starting to get the feeling of what was happening in the field. To shame, embarrass, to humiliate, to disgrace, to dishonor, to confound. It is often used in contexts where individuals or groups are put to shame due to their actions, failures, or as a result of a divine judgment. Ruth, presumably, is a victim of divine judgment. Her husband has died. All the men in the family have died. Divine judgment, we could call it a curse. They are making fun of her, humiliating her, disgracing her, embarrassing her, because her husband, a Jewish man, died in Moab, and it's her fault. This is a very unwelcoming society. The term can also imply being confounded or confused, often as a result of being shamed. I believe Boaz finds her standing in the field, just confounded and confused. She's gathered very little grain, and he comes out and says, "Now listen." He sets her straight. "I told the men not to touch you. I'm telling the men not to humiliate, insult, embarrass you. Just stay close to the young women. It's going to be okay." She falls down. "Thank you. Thank you. You have helped me. You are covering me. You are protecting me." Because the answer to Boaz's question, who's young woman in this? The answer is nobody's. I don't belong to anybody. I have no male to protect me. And Boaz moves into that position. He is a relative of Naomi's. He's going to move into the position to protect her. I want to pause now because I wonder if there is someone in your life that is not seen for some reason. Maybe you have a prejudice, maybe where they've come from, what they've done in the past. But I want us to be like Boaz, and I want to try to see people with God's vision, how he sees their heart. Some people are a bit rough around the edges. Some people are very ungodly and very unrighteous, and we need to stay away from them. And some people, maybe others think they are ungodly and unrighteous, but it's from a prejudice. And it's not true. They are not evil people. They are actually good people. They just need some help. Let's take a minute now, and I want you to think about that and ask God, Lord, is there anyone in my life that I am not seeing with your eyes and you want me to see with your eyes? Show me who that is. Let's take a minute now. Let's continue Ruth chapter 2, verse 17. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. She has now 21 liters. She has 5 gallons of barley seeds. She has taken these stalks of barley. She had to beat it out and let the kernels fall, and she has now collected them. This is a lot of barley. Imagine a 5-gallon bucket full of barley. It weighs about 35 to 40 pounds. And she took it up and went into the city. I try carrying a 5-gallon bucket like that, even across the room. This woman probably had a cloth, picked it up, threw it over her shoulder, and carried it back to town, maybe a mile away. This is a tough woman. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. I always thought that this meant she had this big bushel and she ate from the bushel, and Naomi stood in the corner, and when she was done, she said, okay, you can have some. No, this is the food she got that was already roasted that she put in her pocket. Nobody wants to eat raw barley. It's very, very hard. You want to eat it roasted or made with bread. So Ruth took out of her pocket, gave to her mother-in-law. These are very poor women. They don't have anything to eat. Probably Ruth was eating some of the raw barley in the morning when she was there. It's very hard. Nonetheless, you do what you need to do. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." May he be blessed by the Lord. May Boaz be blessed by the Lord. In this next phrase, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead, could apply to Boaz or it could apply to the Lord. Naomi has been angry with God. She gave quite a long tirade when she entered town. How, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. Mara means bitter. I'm bitter because the Almighty has made me bitter. He's not treated me well. He's not treated me fairly. He brought calamity upon me. He's testifying against me. She had all this negativity flowing out of her mouth. God keeps sending her kindness. He sent Ruth with her. I believe he said, that woman has such a beautiful heart. I want her in Israel. And Naomi now is seeing that the Lord is up to something. It's not just her and manipulating things, that the Lord is actually moving in her favor. He has not abandoned her. Naomi also said to her, "This man is a close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." And Ruth the Moabite said, "Besides, he said to me, 'You shall keep close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest.' And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, 'It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, lest in another field you be assaulted.' So she kept close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law." So this is several months she's going to be working. And that last verse, "and she lived with her mother-in-law," you get the idea that things could be better. That's intended, that verse, "and she lived with her mother-in-law." Most people don't really enjoy living with their mother-in-laws for very long. Short periods of time are fine, but this idea that she's living with her mother-in-law is unsettling. Thank you. There's a little clue here that Ruth would like something more for herself. And you can see that because Boaz says to her, "Stay close to my young women." And when Ruth tells the story to Naomi, the author adds something that's interesting. "Besides, he said to me, 'You shall keep close by my young men.'" It's showing this is a young woman. She wants to be married. She's thinking, now that Boaz has talked to the young men, they're probably safe now. I could get closer to them. Maybe I could meet one of them and get married. I don't want to live with my mother-in-law for the rest of my life. This is not a good scenario for me. But Naomi tells her it's too dangerous. Don't stay close to the young men. Stay close to the young women, or you could be assaulted. This is too risky for you to get near the young men. But Ruth wants a husband. It's normal. It's natural. This is what the story is about. Okay, God is going to act here, and let's see what he's going to do. Ruth chapter 3. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he's winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go, uncover his feet, and lie down. And he will tell you what to do." And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." Wow. This is going to be quite an adventure for Ruth, who every night has come home to her mother-in-law. Now, it's interesting that several months have passed. She has been out in the fields gleaning. She's been working hard. It doesn't sound like any men have come by the house courting her or interested in her. She's not meeting anyone. It could be from these things that we've talked about, how she is seen in town, not as someone who would be healthy to marry. Maybe they're passing rumors, "Oh, you marry her, you're likely to die," just like her other husband. Who knows what they're saying, but it appears that she is going to be single for a while. I used to see this threshing floor as sort of a convention center kind of a scene, a big party. You know, they're going to be eating and drinking. It's a big community party. I don't think so. I think this is nothing but men who are threshing the grain, working at night, and then they sleep there around the grain. Why would they do that? To protect it. Someone's going to steal it. This is the culture. This is the culture. This is why there has been a moral famine. People were not honest. They were stealing. Their scales were dishonest. They were testifying in court dishonestly. They were sleeping with people that they shouldn't. There was a lot of unrighteousness going on, and God didn't like it. So she's going to go down to the threshing floor, which is not a covered convention center as I imagined reading this before. This is an open space for the purpose of threshing grain. How do you thresh grain? You, first of all, either you step on it or an animal walks on it. A threshing floor is the one place in town that has a tiled, hard surface so that animals, an ox that's threshing the grain, you can have animals walking on this, and as they walk on the barley or the wheat, it knocks the kernels off. Then you take a winnowing fork and you throw it like a pitchfork. You throw it up in the air. The chaff blows away. The kernels fall down on the tile. And you go and you collect it on the tile. You may put some sort of a cloth or something to collect it, but this is how it's done. And then you do it over and over, and you get more and more purified kernels of barley or wheat or whatever you're threshing. It's an open space. It's usually up on a hill. Why? Because they want the most wind possible to carry the chaff away. So there's an open space, and she's not to let herself be seen until the man goes to sleep. So she is waiting, like out in the behind a tree, out in the bushes. I'm not sure where she's waiting, but she's not. This is not a party where there are women, because it says later, let it not be known a woman came to the threshing floor. This is a man's deal. They are going to stay out there. They are going to sleep by the grain, and women are not there, except for Ruth, who's, I can imagine, absolutely terrified. She has this undercover mission that Naomi has given her, and she has to go and time this just right. She shouldn't be seen by any of the other men. She needs to see where he lays down, go and uncover his feet. Why is she uncovering his feet? It's Bethlehem. The temperature of Bethlehem is about the same as it would be here in San Diego. So at night, it can get cool. Even in the summertime, the temperature will drop. The wind is blowing, the temperature will drop. So she's taking a cloak with her, because this is not a covered shelter. She's going to be sleeping outside. Well, I don't think she's going to be sleeping at all. I think she's going to be laying awake absolutely. And this night, she's probably not going to sleep much because of what she's about to do. She's about to ask this man to marry her. Why doesn't she go to Boaz's house? Mr. Boaz, you're a close relative. Would you marry me? We need to understand. If we don't understand why, in fact, why didn't her and Naomi go right straight from Moab right to Boaz's house? Boaz, relatives are here. She's a Moabite. You don't have to marry a Moabite. There's a law of kinsman redeemer. The closest relative needs to redeem her, raise up seed, sleep with her, get her pregnant so she can have a male heir. Because she's a Moabite, all bets are off. You don't have to marry a Moabite. In fact, it says in the law that Moabites are excluded from the assembly of the Lord. So there are a number of reasons why they didn't go straight to Boaz's house with their claim on him. She has worked for several months. He has observed her. He knows that she is a woman of character. He sees her. There is a tremendous class difference. She is a destitute woman. He's a wealthy man in town. By marrying her, he also is going to be criticized. He's going to be taking on some of the talk, some of the curses, some of the scorn that people were heaping on her. And we're going to see that a little bit later. But this is the reason why they don't march up to Boaz's house. If they did, he would say, oh, there's another Redeemer closer. Why don't you go down the road and talk to him, knock on his door. He's actually your closest. Thanks, but no thanks. She had to spend some time with him. He had to see her character. And that is what this love story is about. It is about character. It is about the character of Boaz representing Christ, who wants to help, who loves her, not assaulting her, not some sexual thing. He loves her and he wants her best. This is what God's love is. God's love is not some feeling you get. It's when God wants your best, and he wants my best. And that's why he gives us laws. And that's why we have to wait sometimes. Ruth had to wait several months living with her mother-in-law, not doing what she wanted, going closer to the young men to see if she could catch someone's eye. She's a young woman and she had to wait. I want to pause now because some of us are in situations where God wants us to show patience. We want it done now. This is wrong. This is injustice. We want to fix the situation, and we're planning and we're scheming, and we know just how to fix it. And we can call this lawyer, and then we can get that to happen, and I will make my will occur. And Jesus came to show us that your will needs to be submitted to God's will. He showed us, even to death, how we must wait and submit our will to God's will. We cannot force righteousness on this earth. We cannot force our friends and relatives and acquaintances and neighbors to do the right thing. We have to wait patiently on God to act. Let's take a moment and think about that, and maybe pray. If there's something that you want and you've been really trying to push it forward and manipulate it in your own life, maybe you could take some time now. And I want you to pray. Ask God what you should do and what patience looks like in your situation. Let's take a moment. We've got a lot of adventure next week. Well, it's just like the movies, right? We have a cliffhanger. I won't tell you how it works out, but you trust me, it's a feel-good story. It's not Cinderella, but it's a feel-good story. So let me pray for us. Father, I thank you for everyone who's come today, and I pray that we would have the patience of Ruth and the compassion of Boaz. And I bless those who've come, and I pray for their lives and their faith and my faith, that we would trust you. May the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you, lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. Go in peace. Bless you. Amen.